Hey guys, Dr. Ruth Roberts here, the developer and creator of the original crockpot diet. I hope you all are well. I know that y'all are probably thinking about all the folks down in Houston and all the pets as well. It looks like they did much better though in terms of keeping pets with the families and things of that nature instead of them being abandoned and then having to go back and try to rescue them as what happened in Katrina. But my heart goes out to the folks in Houston. I just cannot imagine the misery that they're going through, and they still have probably another week or so to deal with the flooding and things of that nature. So Houston, here's to you. I think folks down there have got another good week in front of them before they can even figure out what they need, because the flooding is that severe. So we'll check in with you, see what groups are actually able to provide help for people with pets, and if there's local veterinarians we can support to help pets down there so that they get taken care of too. A couple of really fun studies came out on the human side, and I say that tongue-in-cheek because I think this last one is definitely the nail in the coffin on fat being bad for you. And I'll put a link to this article, but essentially the PURE study, which is a prospective of urban and rural people, and what the study looked at was 135,000 people in 18 countries, ranging in age from 35 up to 80 and change, across all socioeconomic levels, and over a 10-year period of time. They looked at what were people eating. And so this is self-reported, and there's inherently some issues with that. But they also compared that then to who had heart attacks, who didn't have heart attacks, was their relative risk dropped based on eating this, that, or the other, and then all-cause mortality. So that's a big thing you'll see in most human studies. Does something increase or lower your all-cause mortality? And the results of this study are fascinating. What they found is that high carbohydrate diets, yes indeed, they do increase your risk of heart attack. Yes, your LDL cholesterol will be lower, but everything else, your triglycerides and all the other things that create risk for heart attack or stroke, are elevated. And lo and behold, saturated fat did not. High saturated fat diets did not cause heart attacks. And in fact, there was some evidence that a high saturated fat diet actually decreased your risk of stroke. So the incidence, so as you eat fat, higher fat, lower heart attack, lower stroke risk, lower heart disease risk in general. Boom, completely opposite of what we've heard since the last 20 years. The other thing that was fascinating is that, yes, indeed, high vegetable and fruit intake is also important in preventing heart disease and all-cause mortality. But the interesting thing was that the total servings per day that provided that optimal benefit was 3 to 4 versus 8, 7. You hear all sorts of crazy things anymore because frankly people don't trust what's being put out by myplate.gov or any other sort of mainstream nutritional source. And so we've made some stuff up because it seemed to work in this group of people. So here's some actual evidence that yep, fruit and vegetables are good. So about 3 to 4 servings, which works out to about 375 to 500 grams, or for those of us on the English system, 3/4 to a pound total. Versus, I've seen recommendations of 2 pounds, 3 pounds. I mean, just insane volumes of vegetables. The other big study that came out, which is fascinating, is, and I have to read the drug name because it's hard to say, it's Canakinumab, which is it is a monoclonal antibody against a specific inflammatory molecule, not anti-inflammatory, but pro-inflammatory molecule specific to heart disease called interleukin 1b. And so the researchers were looking at whether this drug was better at protecting people from additional heart attacks versus just statins. And it was. It reduced the number of episodes of heart attacks, stroke, and TIAs and all those weird little cardiovascular events. But it didn't decrease the risk of death. And so, at a price tag of $65,000 a year, is this drug going to ever come to market? Probably not, because its benefit is really quite limited for the cost. But what this study did show us is that reducing inflammation in the heart reduces heart attack and stroke. Golly, wow. So all of a sudden, everything functional medicine has been saying for the last several decades is being proven in research, which is awesome. So again, in using functional medicine in dogs and cats, the three things that I look at that as most important are controlling inflammation, improving digestion, and detoxification. So again, let's eat our way back to health if we can, and use drugs and supplements when we need to help support that. So that was very, very awesome news. I'll put the links to the Pure study, which I think is fascinating. They also talk about it in three different segments as far as fats and lipids and blah blah. So why am I telling you about human studies? Because we don't have data in veterinary medicine, and certainly, the vast majority of people are still feeding a very high carb diet. Even if you're feeding a grain-free diet, chances are good that it's still in excess of 65% carbohydrate. So if we know now that this diet increases heart attack and in humans, and one of the mechanisms of heart disease / heart attack / stroke is inflammation, then I think we need an anti-inflammatory diet. And so there you go. Crockpot diet, home cooked vegetables, protein, and fats in a balanced format. They're still, interestingly enough, in the Pure study, they're reluctant to recommend under 55% carbohydrates. The current recommendation is somewhere around 75% carbohydrate in the diet. The crockpot diet is about a third, or 33 1/3% of carbohydrate, but the vast majority of them is in complex carbohydrate, which are vegetables, and then some comes from simple carbohydrates, rice, potatoes, things of that nature. So that's, it's just all starting to point back here. And interestingly, it is pointing to you taking responsibility for your and your pet's health. So the other startling information that came out of the heart drug study was that only 17% of heart attacks and stroke occur in people that have known risk factors. So my family has all died of heart attack and stroke, and so that's one of the things that I've controlled for through my life. But just like breast cancer, genetically, 10% of the cases are genetic. The rest are lifestyle choices. Wow. So you really do have so much more control than you even realize. The other thing that's of interest too is not having just huge volumes of vegetables. So that's going to be interesting to see how that comes along. So wanted to share that with you. I had a message from Kirsten, and she has a dog that has been had been diagnosed with early kidney failure. She bought the kidney program, started implementing some of those things, and chose not to go to the low protein based kidney diet because, again, in my experience, unless the disease is really severe in advance, I just don't think that it makes a big difference as far as how the kidney failure affects the dog or the cat, but it does make a big difference in terms of muscle wasting. And so for older pets that are already arthritic, if they lose muscle, the arthritis becomes more of a problem. So that's not fun. But here's the awesome news from Kirsten. She had some repeated lab work done because her pup was drinking a ton of water and peeing in the house. So they wanted to make sure that there was no urinary tract issue and no increase in the kidney values. Well, lo and behold, his SDMA, which is the new test from IDEXX, is now normal after 2 months on the diet. It's down from 23 to 8, which is freaking awesome. BUN went from 35 to 20, and creatinine went down to 1.3. And her vet is shocked. She is shocked. They're not sure what to say. And she says in her message, this is absolutely incredible and has truly shown me the power of good food. Her veterinarian is concerned that the peeing issue is either the salt in the food or the veggies that are acting like a diuretic and causing him thirst. And he'd also had a reflux issue, so we went to a limited number of ingredients to try and sort that out, which was helpful as well. So this is the thing that's fascinating. Is it causing increased thirst? Maybe. Typically we see pups and kitties as well that actually decrease or almost stop drinking water completely. And so one of the things, so the kale may be creating some irritation though still that is creating this thirst drive. Your dog may be drinking because it's not reflexing and showing you overt symptoms, but it's still not feeling real great. And kale is, all of the brassica species, while they're great and they provide awesome health benefits, they can be irritating to the GI tract. So yes, that's very possible that kale is an issue, although not so much because it's a diuretic. The other thing I've seen happen is that when animals start on the crockpot diet, they tend to lose weight really quickly. And if they're really dropping weight and getting skinny, they tend to drink a lot of water because they're hungry, and that's kind of what they have access to. So Kirsten, 2 things I would try. If you feel like your pup has gotten really skinny or dropped a bunch of weight, and I think you can ask your veterinarian for the scale weight change between when you started and just recently. And if that's really dropped, then we need to bump up the food volume. So if you're still not sure, the other thing you can do, like we talked about last week, is just send in 2 pictures, top and sides, and happy to help you figure out if your pet's at the right weight, too low, that sort of stuff, and go from there. Now, back to the kale issue. If things are better with the reflux, but you've ruled out that dropped too low of a body weight and hunger is not the reason for the increase in thirst and drinking, then what I would do is drop the kale completely, and use some other veggies. So you're using green beans already, so maybe some zucchini or something of that nature, and see if that's okay or not okay. The interesting thing is that zucchini we think of as kind of innocuous, but it is moderately high in FODMAPs, which can increase GI sensitivity. So, kind of take notes. If you notice something switching, changing with that switch in vegetables for the better or for the worse, then you know what you need to do or not need to do. And it may simply be that with brassica vegetables, you just have to really limit the volume that your pup's eating. So that's what I would suggest doing. But I mean, that's just awesome news. Those values dropped so quickly. And so she's completely got her pup back into the normal range on kidney values. So awesome. I love it when the solution is simple. Lastly, we were, cruising around the last 2 weeks. So last week I was in Gerhardt, Oregon, and having a great time out there. But we spent the last day in Seattle as we were getting ready to fly back here to Charleston, and we dropped by the Emerald City Pet Rescue, which is based out of Seattle. And they've got a really unique way to help pets find their perfect match. So it is completely community supported pet rescue, and it was started by a very generous donor. Starbucks has donated. I think I talked with Harper there, and I think They've got 3 different facilities, and I believe their Kitty Harbor is in the Starbucks headquarters. I may be wrong, but I think that's correct. My memory gets a little thin sometimes. They've got a dog shelter, which is the one we dropped by, and then a 3rd facility, which is sort of their intake facility, and that's where they're able to get animals in, get them kind of chilled out to their new surroundings, get veterinary care taken care of on an as-needed basis, and then start to figure out, who is this dog? What family is he going to do best with? Which family will this cat do best with? That kind of stuff. They don't have a walk through and take a look at the animals type deal. They have sort of a Facebook, if you will, at the counter available, and on their website as well, of which animals they have available for adoption. Their process for you, the adopter, is what's really kind of interesting to me. You fill out a form, you talk about who you are, what your family's like, what your time at home is, fenced yard, other pets already in the house, that kind of stuff. And their goal here is to make sure that the pet that you get matched with is going to fit your family and your lifestyle. Because one of the biggest issues for shelters is that people adopt pets, and then 2, 3, 4 months later, the dog or the cat gets dumped back off at the shelter. So, in multiple failures, make it very difficult for that animal to be adopted. And because their lives become very unsteady, they tend to develop more behavior issues. So I think they're doing a fantastic job with that. So they go through your paperwork. You look at pets that you think might work, and I write those down, and then they call you, talk with you a little bit more, invite you in for sort of a one-on-one hangout with the pup or kitty they think is going to best fit you and your family. And if that works, then what they do is come to your home and do an in-home visit, and if everything looks great and like it will work, then they'll leave that pet with you as your newly adopted pet. The awesome thing is that they keep touching and base with people to make sure things are going okay. They have training services, which Charleston Animal Society here in Charleston also offers, to help keep the pet in the home. And they do enough follow-ups so that 1, 2, 3 months don't go by, you're not frustrated, that kind of stuff. So I'll put a link to their site as well, but just a really cool way to approach pet adoption and hopefully achieve success right off the rip. So that is what I have for you this week. Do you guys have questions that you can think of? And Vilma Crump, thank you so much for sharing the video, because that just helps get the word out again. If you don't have questions, that's all good. And I think there was one other thing I was supposed to talk about today, and I do not have it on my notes, so that's gone. But at any rate, I just wanted to share the good news with you that yes, you have control over how your life is going to be, and how your pet's life is going to be, just to a great degree, simply by what you feed. So remember, your pet's best health starts in the bowl. Take good care, and I'll see you next week.